Welcome to another episode of Planet Possible. We're delighted you're joining us to hear evidence-led discussion about topics that are critical to the way we manage our water, nature and climate. A huge thanks to our sponsors Mackley, MWH Treatment and BMA, and you'll hear a little more about them later. And we're grateful for their support in bringing the pod to you. If you're new to Planet Possible, I'm Niki Roach. I'm an enthusiastic connector of people and ideas and a fellow of CIWEM, the Chartered Institution of Water and Environmental Management. I am here in sunny Havant Thicket near the south coast at the site of the first new reservoir to be built in the UK since 1972. I'm standing on the top of some porta cabins overlooking the site, and if I look around me I can see a lot of plant machinery, some massive cranes already busy at work early in the morning. There are huge sections of pipe that will be culverts for other pipes to run through, earthworks everywhere and activity wherever I look. And off in the distance, a beautiful woodland running all the way around the boundary of the site. We're here today to find out all about how you even build a new reservoir when we've not done it for 30 years. And how do you do that in a really responsible and sustainable way? And I'm joined by Terry Fuller from Future Water. Terry, tell me a little bit about the size and scale of this project.
So we are looking across a site which will be about 1.6 kilometres long, that's a mile or so, and about 0.8 of a kilometre wide. So it's pretty vast. It will retain nearly 9 billion litres of water when it's completed, and that's enough to supply 21 million litres of water a day to about 160,000 customers.
And why this location?
Well, if you were to get a textbook and try and sort of work out what would the perfect site be for a reservoir, this is almost it, really. It's a great big basin made up of clay, which means we can use that clay. We don't have to bring any clay into the site. It's got broadly a basin shape or a valley type shape, but it means we do have to build an earth embankment at the downstream face of it to actually retain the water. Pretty secluded here, as you can see. I mean, there are people that live around here, but they are some distance away from the perimeter of the site, so noise and disruption, that kind of thing, is less of an impact than it could otherwise have been.
So 160,000 customers. I think one of the things that's interesting about this site is that it's being built for Portsmouth Water, but the water's not going to be used initially by Portsmouth Water customers. Tell us a little bit about how this site's going to operate when it's fully functional.
Well, this is very much, I think, consistent with the water solution around the country, in that you're going to be looking at cooperatives between regions and regional transfers, corporations between water companies. So here, Portsmouth Water owned this site. They bought it actually back in 1965, which was very sort of forward-thinking of them at that time. But right now, their customers don't need the water. The neighbouring Southern Water do. So Portsmouth are building the reservoir, they will operate it, and they will be selling that water effectively to Southern Water and to their customers.
And how long is it going to take to fill once it's built?
Well, this is one that surprises people, actually. It's going to take about 3 years to fill it up. Two reasons, really. One is that we can't over abstract water out of the spring water, which is the source of the reservoir water. So we have to only take that water out during the winter months, so hence the 3 years. The other one is a bit more techie than that, in that when you build an earth embankment, you can't just fill it up with water and shock it with all that load. You've got to fill it up in stages, let the embankment adjust to those water pressures before you then fill it up to the next stage. So those are the two reasons why.
And you talked briefly there about Southern Water needing the water. What's their stress, I guess? What's their pressure that they're under at the moment?
It's immense pressure. They're not going to be able to supply their customers over the next sort of decade or two unless something is done. The reservoir is just one of a basket of measures, really, along with sort of leakage control, demand management. So, ironically, we're building a reservoir here which people will think, great, I can water my gardens now, but we've also got to think about demand management as well. Obviously, the southeast is one of the most water stressed regions in the country, and so it's most acutely felt here in terms of impacts of climate change on water supply, but also population growth in the area as well.
So we talked about how the reservoir is going to be fed by springs, and that's going to give us, I think you said, 21 million litres a day that can head to Southern Water customers. But there's something else that's in the planning process at the moment that's really quite unique and special about this reservoir. Tell us a little bit about that.
What we're looking at is a recycled water component, and it is early stages yet. It's not been confirmed in the project. But what that does is it gives opportunity to maintain water levels in the reservoir at a sort of full or near to full state for more parts of the year. We're not just reliant on the natural springs, and clearly we can't over abstract from that. That would be very damaging to the environment. So what we're looking at is a system whereby we take the water that would normally be treated and then returned into the river, which then goes into the sea and then comes back through evaporation into the water cycle. We're kind of intercepting that process, and we're saying, right, we've treated that water, we've got that water, let's keep hold of it, store it in our reservoir, and then use it to supply people in a more reliable fashion going forward.
And if that does become approved, how much more water is available to Southern Water customers?
The classic scheme is 21 megalitres of water available. That would increase to 90 megalitres with the recycled component, and actually the deficit that Southern Water are looking to make up is 160. It's a good step in the right direction, but still on its own not enough.
Okay, we've come to the middle of quite a windy bit of the site, near where the wetlands are going to be. I'm joined by Hayley Drain, who is a graduate environmental advisor here. Hayley, tell me a little bit about what your role entails.
So as the graduate environment advisor on the site, we're making sure that all the actions on site are compliant with the environment. The project is environmentally led, so it's so important that we enforce that at site level. We'll go out every day and make sure that we're compliant with the waste, we're compliant with our statutory nuisance, which is dust and noise. We're making sure all the water leaving site is compliant with our limits. It's just really ensuring that the whole project from site level documents are all followed.
So we've already had a bit of a walk round and I've seen some ducks and quite a lot of seagulls. Tell me a bit about the ecology that you're finding on site.
Yeah, so obviously we are a construction site. We're not wanting animals to come into the area, but equally when animals do, it's natural. And recently we have actually had a little ringed plover come to site twice actually this season already. They are a Class A bird, Category 1, so it basically means they are highly protected. A 100-metre exclusion zone is required. But the environmental awareness of the workers on site is amazing. We're all trying to make sure that we are as environmentally led as possible.
Tell me about the plovers. So what did you do when your little ringed plover decided to nest in the middle of a construction site? In fact, just behind us, I think, here.
Yes, yeah. We put a gabion cage over the top of the nests. The cage is big enough to allow the parents, the mum and dad, to come in and out of the nest, but the squares of the gabion cage are small enough so that predators don't get the eggs. So it just makes sure that the eggs can hatch, and then once the eggs have hatched, we, under supervision of an ecal with the correct licence, they'll remove the cage, let nature take its course really.
Extraordinary. In the midst of all of this huge amount of construction activity, that the plover decided that was the place it wanted to live. But brilliant that you were able to help it successfully on its way. Thank you so much for talking to me, Hayley.
Thank you very much.
So we've got this beautiful view behind us. We're in Memory Park, which is on the opposite side of the site to where all the site cabins were. I'm joined by Eleanor Shipton, who is the Comms and Engagement Lead, and Ruth Frith, who's the Assistant Environment Manager, both from Portsmouth Water. Eleanor, let's start by hearing from a Portsmouth Water perspective what you think about this extraordinary new asset that you're building.
Well, this is an absolutely fantastic project to be part of. It's being built for the benefit of two incredibly precious chalk streams in Hampshire, the River Test and the River Itchen.
So Ruth, tell us about the Test and the Itchen and how they link to a site that's quite far away here in Havant.
So they're both internationally protected for their fish and aquatic species. Are just a really rare habitat, which is globally rare. The project itself is like a key driver is to reduce the abstraction from those streams. That's what links us really.
So we know that Southern Water have got some challenges around struggling to supply their customers into the future because of reducing the abstractions from those two streams. So this is a kind of partnership. One of the things that I know about the site is that there has been some ancient woodland that's been lost because of the build. And if we look back, there's quite a stark line between the forest and then the boundary of the site. Tell me a little bit from an environmental perspective about what you're doing about that and some of the stakeholder engagement that's happening and their kind of responses to it.
Sadly, there was mention of woodland that was lost. I think it's about 12.6 hectares in total, and obviously target is something we would try and avoid. However, the project is environmentally led. We've got a programme of mitigation works and compensation works, which is in excess of 200 hectares of habitat improvements and enhancements, both on and off-site. So we've got a number of projects. Some of the off-site projects include a rewilding site, which we've got up at South Holt Farm, where we've engaged with the Pigshed Trust, who are a conservation charity, and they are basically going to manage that site as wood pasture, woodland and grassland for the next 80 years. So it's a really interesting project. For any management they need, they just use cattle for grazing. So we have that site. We have Southley Forest, which is just down the road, 72 hectare site of broadleaf woodland in collaboration with the Hampshire and Isle of Wight Wildlife Trust, and it's really important for bats, that site. So ecology monitoring, managing the woodland, there's a lot of non-native species in there, so over time we're looking to sort of encourage more broadleaf native woodland, putting together a conservation management plan for that site as well. In addition, under the footprint of the reservoir, there was actually 3.8 kilometres of watercourses which have been lost to the footprint of the reservoir. So in collaboration with the Environment Agency and under the Water Framework Directive, we now have a mitigation package of 5.5 kilometres of watercourse enhancement within the catchment. In relation to some of the concerns at the beginning of the project, there was a group called Stop the Chop. We work with them very closely, and they have now come on board, and they're now rebranded as Havant Thicket for Nature, and they're part of our sort of key stakeholder group, and we work with them very closely, replanting rescued saplings from some of the ancient woodland sites, as well as translocating some of those trees that were sort of small enough to be translocated. And we now have an aftercare contractor who's engaged for the next 5 years or more to look after all the replanting, the advanced replanting sites, as well as all the translocations that have been undertaken.
Mackley is a civil engineering contractor specialising in water sector infrastructure, coastal projects and river works. Striving for a sustainable future, Mackley helps communities prepare better for climate change, maintain water security and enhance biodiversity. With a proud 98-year history, Mackley continues to skillfully tackle the most challenging and complex projects in water. MWH Treatment is one of the UK's leading water and wastewater process contractors. MWH offers a truly integrated design and build service that's uniquely dedicated to the water industry. With an innovative and future-facing approach, everything MWH does is guided by its purpose to shape a better world. I am here with James Hanson, who is one of the 3 construction managers, and we're standing in front of a 7-metre reinforced concrete arch. James, tell me a little bit about what you're responsible for on the project.
I was originally looking after the civils elements of the scheme, which involved actually the creation of this culvert trial that we did back in November last year. Subsequently moving over to look at the mechanical, electrical and instrumentation sides of the project. So we've got a few remote sites from the main reservoir here, which include Bedhampton Pumping Station and Farlington Water Treatment Works.
What are some of the challenges that you've come across, I guess, in those 2 roles that you've been doing on site?
The main challenges that we've had here at the main reservoir site was the environmental aspects and planning. So this was a greenfield site in quite a sensitive area that's very close to the ancient woodland. So just to the left of us here, we've got Havant Thicket, which is ancient woodland, so a really rare habitat. So one of the important things for us has been, as an environmentally led project, just making sure that we're looking after the ecology and being responsible with what we're doing here. So that's posed some challenges with stakeholders because people are really invested in the local area. So we've had quite a lot of engagement, and trying to get planning permission and all of these things has been a bit of a challenge. That's part of what I've been doing here for the main reservoir works, and transferring some of that learning over to those remote sites that I mentioned.
And this 7-metre culvert that we just talked about, this was a trial in its first instance. So tell me what it's for and how you're going to use these on site.
This culvert section here is 7 metres tall and it's 7 metres wide as well. So this contains the main pipework that fills and empties the reservoir. That's why the size of it is so great, is the pipework inside is actually 1.6 metre diameter pipework, so quite significant. The reason we did a trial was to try and test out some of the operational requirements, so making sure the shuttering worked, seeing how we could fix at height, because obviously being 7 metres off the ground, it was quite a challenge to make sure that we had the right access requirements for steel fixing, and also doing some quality baseline assessments, so just making sure the temperature gain within the structure was in line with what the designers expected, and we didn't have sort of runaway curing and any cracking issues.
And given that we haven't built a reservoir here for a very long time, are you finding there are skills that you don't have that you're needing to train people up, or is this really transferable from lots of other sort of civils projects?
The general principles are quite transferable. durable reinforced concrete we use all over the country and in lots of applications. More than that, it's getting people on board with what we're actually trying to create here and seeing it as an asset, because people haven't seen one of these being built before. So the impact in terms of traffic and vibration and dust is really quite a lot, and people sort of don't appreciate that this is going to be a big thing going forward and it's going to benefit the local community.
So we've talked about some of the challenges. I guess, what are some of your learnings? We know that there are a lot more reservoirs that will be being built probably in the UK over the coming years. So if you were to talk to construction managers of those future projects, what are some of the big takeaways from this one from you?
The biggest thing is how key design is to the whole process. So this reservoir was a design and build, which is obviously a fantastic opportunity, but it also comes with inherent risk. Things like new technology, essentially the principles of how we design it, are slightly lacking in this country. So we've had to outsource stuff to America and to Australia, which is fantastic, bringing experts from those countries. But what it does do is it means that there is a slower process in terms of getting approvals for design. So lessons learned would be get as much design complete before you hit the ground. It's had an impact on the site progress here, but it's been a positive one, and we've got solutions, and we've got to a point now where we've started construction, which is fantastic, but it has been a bit of a struggle at points.
This is an absolutely ginormous project. Just looking around the site, the scale of it is kind of breathtaking, really. There are 3 construction managers. How connected do you have to be to make sure that ultimately at the end of this you've got a functioning reservoir and all the ancillary kit that needs to work with it?
I mean, completely. We have to be in synergy, and we have federated models that from a design perspective we can make sure all of the elements fit together. But in terms of the 3 construction managers, we have several meetings a week just to make sure that everyone is aligned on what the goals are, where people are working. So our programs have to be aligned, all our quality procedures, everything has to be going towards the end goal, which is the completion of this reservoir. So it's absolutely key that we get on and we speak on a regular basis.
I'm out in the middle of the site, surrounded by diggers and dumpers, huge amounts of earthworks happening at this stage, and the ground all around me is full of the Reading clay, which is this rich red colour, and then London clays, and it's this material that makes this such a suitable site to build. What's really interesting is that the team are going to use all of the clay on the site to build the earth embankment, and it's that makes it able to hold water back. So it means that they're not having to bring any clay onto site, reducing vehicle movements and just being more sustainable all round, really. So we've come to Memory Park with Lizzie Sams, who is the Planning and Engagement Manager for Future Water. Lizzie, we're standing on the boundary of the site here. I can see some houses immediately behind me. Tell me a little bit about the communities that surround the new Havant Thicket Reservoir.
So we're currently stood in Havant, which is one of our 2 local authorities that the site is within. A specific area of Havant is Lee Park, which is a large area of social housing. And then to the other side, we've got Rowlands Castle, which is on the very edge of the South Downs National Park.
So how have you engaged with these communities? I guess this is a really big and quite long project that's happening in the middle of them all.
Prior to the start of construction on the reservoir, there was a lot of engagement with the local community and a lot of discussion about what benefits that we could bring as a contractor and as the client for Portsmouth Water to the area, particularly focused on recreation at the reservoir site, but also in terms of education, upskilling, employment and opportunities. We particularly focus on opportunities in education. We've had a lot of opportunity to do site visits for local schools. We're also going into those schools, taking part in careers events and looking at fulfilling the CITB criteria for recruitment into construction. We also have an employment and skills plan for the project, which requires us to recruit apprentices, graduates, take on work placements. Specifically, T-levels is a big focus for the local area, and there's a construction course at the local college. So we're really pleased in the next couple of months to welcome back one of our T-level placements from last year, who's starting on a construction site management degree apprenticeship. So things like that, upskilling the local area and giving them the opportunities that might not already be on their doorstep.
Give me a sense of the scale of people that's working on the site at the moment, because it feels really busy and there's a lot of machinery happening. How many people are working here roughly?
So at the moment we're in sort of what we'd call peak earthworks season, and we've got about 180 people working on the site. That's made up of about 60 people or so in the office and about 120 out on the rest of the site. That's people in machines, that's people working on the culvert, site managers, engineers, all those kinds of roles.
And let's just talk for a moment about legacy. So you've touched there on skills and training and engagement with local communities. What do you hope the legacy of the project is going to be?
So what we're hoping to do is come into the local area and leave a positive footprint on the local area. It's an area of quite high unemployment, so things like our employment and skills plan targets, bringing people in on foundational level roles. We've done a skills boot camp, for example, where we had the opportunity to bring in 20 people who are currently unemployed, put them through a week of training on things like health and safety, site management, those kinds of skills. And then the second week they had the opportunity to get a ticket for a roller or a front loading dumper, which provides them with a skill that they can then take away from the project and use in the wider local area with all the other construction projects going on. And it's things like that, or we can bring those people in, give them those foundational skills and then build upon them for the next 4 years, train them up into things like excavators and dozers and ADTs so they can go on and work in the sector and work on other reservoirs in the future.
So we've come just outside the perimeter of the site into a little bit of the woodland here at Havant Thicket. I'm joined by Ollie Sanderson, who is a health and safety advisor on the project. Ollie, you're local to this area, so how does it feel to be involved in a project that's changing the landscape as much as it is?
It's really nice to come back and build on an area where I grew up as a child, and I used to play on my bike here as a child. And I'm looking forward to bringing my kids back here when it's all built with a nice visitor centre and a pathway around the outside.
What was it like before all the construction started? Paint us a little bit of a picture when you were on your bike as a kid. What were you cycling around?
So there was a sort of a muddy track up the middle in the winter with huge puddles, and there was a bit of woodland up the middle that used to go out and play in. There was also an upper lake. It was sort of a marshland in the winter, so it's quite nice to actually build something that's going to benefit the area rather than just a marshland, I'd say.
And do you still live locally?
Yes, I live in Bedhampton.
So what do your children think about what's being built here? Do they know what Dad does?
They do love it. My 3-year-old son absolutely loves diggers and dumpers, and I can bring him to the perimeter on a Saturday morning and he looks in, he really does enjoy it. He loves it.
I love that. You're like, no, I don't really want to go back to work on a Saturday, and then you're bringing the kids to come and have a look. I was thinking the same. There are a lot of bits of very cool plant here, aren't there? It's a very interesting site.
Yes, definitely. It's a really nice walkway all around the outside as well. So on a Saturday or a Sunday, I'll happily come back and walk around the outside.
What's being built in terms of what will be left afterwards for you and your family to enjoy on a Sunday afternoon?
So there's going to be a really nice sort of cycle or walking route all the way around the outside. It's going to be a visitor centre with a park, hopefully a cafe. But yeah, the wetland's going to be really interesting. Hopefully it's going to bring a lot of animals and butterflies. My daughter loves butterfly hunting and ladybird hunting, so I'm sure that's going to benefit us.
I think you're creating more work for yourself here, Ollie.
Hopefully, yeah. Keep me in work for a few years. I'm happy with that.
Excellent. Thank you so much for joining us.
Lovely. Thank you.
BMA is a next-gen AI decision intelligence software company. Their cloud-based platform, Decisio, redefines how water and energy companies approach their infrastructure planning to make better, faster and more connected critical decisions, simultaneously achieving net zero, resilience and financial sustainability. So I'm joined by Bob Taylor, who is the CEO of Portsmouth Water. Bob, you've got a really strong water resources position in Portsmouth, but nationally we've got some challenges. What are your reflections on how this new reservoir fits into those wider resource challenges that we've got in the UK?
The issue here is that we haven't really been in the habit of building reservoirs in this country, and reservoirs are critically important, perhaps even more so nowadays than in the past, because our water infrastructure is designed around the weather and the climate. In simple terms, we need reservoirs to store water when we have lots of rain in the autumn time, which refills our aquifers under the ground, increases the flows in all of our rivers so that we can take water out of those rivers and put them into reservoirs for storage for when we need that water in the summer when temperatures are higher, demand is higher and there is less rainfall. So the fact that we haven't had the resilience of reservoirs to call on as much over the last 30 years is now recognised as a major issue, and that's why this is the first of 10 new reservoirs that we're planning over the next 20 years or so around the UK. What we're actually working on, if you look at the holistic picture of all of this, is that we're building a water grid in the southern half of England so that we can move water from Wales, from the northwest, from other parts of the UK where we do have much more rainfall, to areas where water is much more scarce, and that's in the southeast and the East Anglia side of the country.
So one of the things that I think is really interesting about this scheme, Bob, is that it's not just about storing spring water. There's obviously some potential to do something with water reuse. Give me a little bit of a sense of what's planned there and your thoughts around it.
Well, I think it's a very positive proposal. It's a Southern Water proposal to use water from what is their largest wastewater treatment plant, Bud's Farm, to put that water through what I can describe as a state-of-the-art tertiary treatment system. So rather than discharging that water into the sea as normal through the conventional two-stage treatment process, you add a tertiary process on the end, which is using the best technology that we have in the industry to then put that water back into the reservoir and use for the potable water cycle. It's quite a new idea in the UK, but I've worked big chunks of my career overseas where it's much more commonplace in places like Spain, in places like Africa, Singapore, America. Actually, the quality of the water that will come out of that tertiary treatment plant is actually better quality than the surplus spring water, which is the kind of original source of water for Havant Thicket Reservoir. And in addition to that, Southern are trying to solve a 200 million litre a day problem in Hampshire. So they need to find 200 million litres a day of water. And just to put that into context, that is more water than my company supplies in total. They're trying to find a lot of alternative sources for water in an area where we are already stressed. And adding the recycled water to the surplus spring water for the reservoir will change the solution from being a 10% of what they need solution to being a 50 or 60% of what they need solution. So it makes much better use of the reservoir asset and the infrastructure around it in terms of solving the problem for Hampshire. And why have they got to replumb Hampshire? Well, that's because we need to take less water from those two iconic chalk streams, the Test and the Itchen. They've been over-abstracted historically, and there's a strong recognition that we need to restore the natural environment and those important natural habitats. So in drought conditions, Southern won't be taking water from those chalk streams in the future, and these arrangements with Havant Thicket Reservoir are designed to compensate for that.
How do you answer the question that I guess sometimes the public put to the water sector, which is if you just fixed your leaks, we wouldn't need to build new reservoirs, especially when there are some really difficult trade-offs, like in the case of Havant Thicket, the loss of ancient woodland. How do you respond to that, Bob?
I think every company in the country is doing more on leakage reduction today than they ever have done. And that's in a situation where probably we haven't been investing enough in our infrastructure in renewing pipes, which is the ultimate solution to stop leakage. Probably one of the most powerful things that we're going to be doing over the next few years is the installation of smart meters. We're planning to put smart meters on the connections of all of our customers over the next 7 or 8 years to give customers a better idea of their water consumption, because in our area the per capita consumption is actually very high, and we're trying to encourage and support customers to reduce to make sure there's water available for future generations. But the other spin-off from smart metering is that we can detect very quickly where the customer has a leak on their own pipes. And we think something between 40 and 50% of the leakage that we have in the UK is on customers' pipes rather than water company pipes. So our effort tends to be focused on the water company side of the equation, but there'll be a great opportunity in the future. And what we find is that when we point out to customers that they may have a leak on their pipes, they're very keen to get that fixed, and it can have spin-offs for their household insurance and so on. Nobody wants a leak either in their house or in their garden, and increasingly people are recognising that and very willing to do something about that. And we can help them with that, of course.
Is it enough to do all those things? Can that get us out of the situation that we're in, or do we still need to build reservoirs? Because as you say, there are 10 planned, including Havant Thicket, over the next 20 years.
Well, if I cast our minds back about 15 years or so, 2011, 2012, we had 2 very dry winters, one after the other in the industry, and we just didn't get enough rainfall. And as an industry, we became seriously concerned about how that would play out in the future, in the longer term. So we undertook a major piece of engineering consultancy, demand forecasting, I suppose you would call it, where we looked into the future and we said to ourselves, well, if we carry on with the current policy, which is don't build any reservoirs, focus on reducing leakage, focus on helping customers to use water more efficiently, is that going to be enough for the future? And by that time, of course, climate change was really starting to bite and affect our operations. And the outcome of that study was, well, no, it isn't going to be enough. And by 2050, we'll probably run out of water. And since that study was undertaken, probably our attitude towards the environment and the need to improve the environment by taking less water from it has changed dramatically as well. So there's even more drivers to saying that that previous approach isn't going to be sufficient. So the report recommended that we do need to carry on reducing leakage. We do need to carry on helping our customers to use less water, but we also need to build new reservoirs and storage facilities as well, and move water around from where it's in plenty in the country to where it's in deficit. And if we hadn't recommended that, then we would be in this potential crisis situation looking forward. So that is why now we have 10 reservoirs that are stacking up to be built one after the other almost, following a drought, if I may use that term, of 30 or so years where we haven't actually built any major reservoirs. But that's the reason. It's because, we made a case for saying we need to build more reservoirs to secure water supplies for the future.
As the first in that line, Bob, final question for you. What learning would you share with those future projects from what you've experienced in partnership with Southern building Havant Thicket?
It hasn't been all that easy to source expertise in the UK because we haven't built reservoirs for a long time. We're using a lot of internationally backed businesses to help us with this. But there's a whole industry ahead. Reservoirs are hugely interesting structures for people. We've had a massive response from people who want to visit the site and have a look at what's going on, and people are truly gobsmacked when they see what we're planning to do. And ours, if you compare it with, for example, the reservoir that Thames wants to build near Oxford, ours is a bit of a puddle compared to the scale of that one, really. It's generating a lot of interest because of all of the things that people get confused about around our industry and how it works. The fact that it's the first reservoir for 30 years is something that everybody understands. And people ask that question then, well, why has that happened? And that's why we need to explain the story to them, because this will affect the prices that we charge to customers. Prices have gone up recently. That is because we do need to invest more in this heavy infrastructure to secure water for the future.
So I'm back on the roof of the site office on the viewing platform, looking across the Havant Thicket site. A few final reflections from me. One is the sheer scale of the operation here. It really is a ginormous site, and it's extraordinary to think that in a matter of 4 years or so, what I'm looking at will be buried under 20 metres of water. The sheer scale of building a new reservoir kind of has to be seen to be believed. And then I guess my second one is that there are trade-offs, and we've heard about the ancient woodland that's been lost in order to build this site, but also we've heard about the real need for water resources, the urgent need from Southern Water and their customers. It's been really interesting to see that in practice. I can see the woodland around the boundary. It's beautiful, and we've seen some of the wildlife. You get a sense of what might be lost, but also what there is to gain. And I think the final point is about collaboration, really, between two water companies, between a whole range of partners in the joint venture that are delivering this, and then also between this future water venture and the communities and stakeholders that surround the site. And there seems to be a really strong sense of place here and leaving a positive legacy environmentally, but also socially. So thinking about training, making sure that there are jobs and skills for the future. It's been fascinating to see it all. I hope you've enjoyed joining me on the journey. I'm Niki Roach. Stay curious, stay connected, and we'll see you next time.